Scrutiny. I am Councillor Tom Ashton, the chairman of this committee. My vice chairman is Councillor Susan Nutman, who I understand will be joining us shortly and attending her first meeting of this committee. I would like to welcome those new members that are joining us for the first time. I think in this instance that is Councillor Hobson from East Lincolnshire District Council. I would welcome the other new people that are joining us, but I can't spot them in the audience. I would just take this opportunity to record my thanks, and I hope the thanks of the committee to Councillor Alison Austin, Councillor Fiona Martin and Councillor Michael Seymour, who were previously members of this committee from their respective district councils. I would like to welcome all those watching the meeting online via the county's website. I'd like to welcome you, and I'd like to remind you that your comments will remain accessible as part of the recording, which will remain on the website. There is no planned fire drill this morning. In the event of an alarm sounding, we will need to leave the chamber through the rear doors and leave the building through the reception into the front car park. Please ensure that your mobile laptops are turned to silent for the duration of the meeting. Requests to speak will be collated usually by the Vice Chairman, but I'm quite happy to look after that. When invited to speak, you should press the button on your microphone to make it live, then press again when you've finished your contribution. We will now move on to the formal agenda. Welcome, Councillor Middleton. I did just welcome new members that are joining the committee for the first time, so I extend a warm welcome to yourself from Boston Borough. Thank you, Chairman. I apologise for my lateness. The A15 main road seems to be shut. Do we have any apologies for absence and replacement members, please?
Thank you, Chairman. So today I've received apologies from Councillor Reid and Councillor Bedford. Thank you.
Thank you. And do we have any declarations of interest from members of the committee in respect of items on today's agenda? If anything comes up in the course of the meeting, please do let us know at the appropriate moment. Moving on to item 3, the minutes of the meeting of the 15th of May 2023. Are we all content with the minutes that we have from the 15th of May? And Councillor Bunny? Thank you. And a second, Councillor Taylor. Is there any dissent on that? We'll take that as carried. Oh, Councillor Vaughan.
Thank you, Chair. It's a sort of a thank you really on your behalf to every Vice Chair and the Chair before you, and all those people who lobbied the government for the penny rate on the IDB drainage board. It's with great thanks that we received, I think, a few £1,000 at City Council. Pity it's not regular. It's pity we have to pay it in the first instance, but thank you all for contributing to putting pressure on the government to give us that back. The only thing I could add, Chair, is well, I don't know if it can be done or not in this committee, but when we send our rate bills out, we can put down various things, but we can't put IDB, how much we charge for IDB on the bills we send out to customers. I wonder if there's any way we could sort of remediate that, because we pay nearly £1.5 million to the IDBs at City Council. I wonder if it could be sort of itemised on the bill. Apparently the law says we can't do it.
I don't think that's something that we can pick up straight away, but I'm sure that there will be continuing efforts across the sector to pick this up with government generally, acknowledging, as you just have, that the contribution that came through this year has been a one-off grant for what's effectively an annual revenue cost. I'm sure colleagues will pick up as we go forward further lobbying, and I'm sure your point can be factored into that as that carries on. I think they're incredibly valid points, and thank you for your kind remarks. Moving on to announcements by me. Sewerage discharge. The County Council members of this committee will be aware that last Friday the County Council passed a motion to refer the matter of the discharge of sewage into rivers and the sea to this committee, where the issue can be fully aired and actions available to the County Council can be determined. Just to let you know that I will be making arrangements for this item to be brought to us at our next meeting, which is the 20th of November. I think being present in that debate, there is no doubt just how serious this issue is and how serious a great number of members of this council and members of the public take it. And I will look forward to us having that debate on the 20th of November. I'd also remind you that we have confirmed for Monday the 16th of October our visit to one or more of the Lincolnshire groundwater project sites. A detailed itinerary will be circulated to you shortly, and I look forward to as many members of the committee attending as possible. And I've also been very keen that we extend that invitation to the substitute members from the district councils as well. On today's agenda, we have 4 items, so we have time to engage in discussion on each. However, I remind members to make their questions and contributions succinct. Report presenters are reminded to take their reports as read by the committee and summarise the key points. And I'll move on. Are there any announcements from Councillor Colin Davey, the Executive Councillor for Economic Development, Environment and Planning, or Councillor Dyer?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you very much, Chairman. Just very short announcements from me this morning. And for council members of the County Council, some of these will not be new to them, but particularly for the district members, I think it's worth touching on our initiatives and some recent flooding events. So firstly, Chairman, the County Council recognises the major importance of the environmental and economic impact of the coast to the future of the county, and the need to continue to engage with our partners to ensure that the appropriate strategies are developed to manage the risks of coastal flooding, both in the present day and into the future, and to secure resilience for coastal communities against the impacts of climate change and sea level rise. The Adaptive and Resilient Coastal Communities project has completed its evidence gathering of the risks to the coast from climate change, and working with the University of Lincoln, partners on the project have put together a jointly agreed and transparent evidence base so that authorities can start to plan how best to adapt to meet the challenges of climate change and continue to thrive and realise its potential economic contribution to the region and the country through an investment strategy for the coast and all of its communities. In a similar vein, the Humber 2100 project has continued to formulate baseline data to understand the risk of tidal flood risk, which affects the estuary and surrounding land, prior to developing a range of strategic options. And in regards to the Lincolnshire Reservoir project, our officers are in regular communication with Anglian Water, who are putting together a community liaison group to capture the concerns and opportunities the local residents in the allocated area may have regarding that project. Officers will continue to push for the project to incorporate a wider range of benefits than just water storage and distribution, to ensure that the economic, environmental and recreational benefits of the scheme are recognised. So I want to touch on recent flooding events. Following a warm and dry spell in early September, we had some intense spells of rain during the 10th and 11th, which did cause some localised flooding issues. Of 18 reports received into the floods and water team, the majority related to carriageway and external flooding. However, unfortunately, based on the information received to date, 5 properties suffered internal flooding. Inquiries and investigations continue into all of these instances to try and determine any contributory factors that may have raised the issues as a result of the volume of rainfall received. Data is still being gathered However, we do have rainfall data for some locations that shows between 80 millimetres and 150 millimetres of rain fell within a 1 to 2 hour period. And finally, Chairman, I just want to touch on the delivery of capital flood risk projects. While surface water issues as a result of intense rainfall continue to cause concern, I'm pleased to report that LCC are actively delivering works on the ground to better protect communities, as well as developing a pipeline of proposed works to address issues caused by recent instances of flooding. Colleagues within the floods and water team work closely with highways colleagues and those in partner risk management authorities to address localised instances of flooding. Currently, capital funded surface water flood alleviation schemes are being delivered in both Long Bennington and Cherry Willingham to better protect residents and local schools from the effects of surface water flooding. Both of these schemes are due to complete in the next few weeks, whilst a further scheme at Holdingham to replace a culvert and undertake channel maintenance work is set to commence at the end of this month. Collectively, these three schemes will better protect a further 60 properties from the effects of surface water flooding in the future. And as regards Schedule 3 of the Flood and Water Management Act, that is on your agenda today, Chairman, so I shall not touch on that. That's the end of my my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Davey. Do we have any other officer announcements from those present? Not at the moment. Item 5, Councillor Baxter.
May I ask a question of Councillor Davey, please?
Go ahead.
Thank you. I wonder, we've heard from Councillor Vaughan from Lincoln that the internal drainage board issues have been resolved there. I feel a little bit behind the curve. It might be my fault, but have the issues that were raised at the meeting in February about East Lindsey and Witham Forest IDBs, is the situation with regard to funding for those IDBs now sorted?
Chairman, I'll answer this briefly and then hand over to you, because you've done a lot of good work on this area. I would just say that as far as I'm concerned, the long-term solution is still not in place. The announcements that we heard earlier this year for IDB funding was for 1 year. So the work needs to continue in terms of lobbying government to make this a permanent solution. But Chairman, maybe you can help Councillor Baxter with any of the bits I've missed.
Thank you very much, Councillor David. Yes, I mean, based on the my knowledge and understanding of the subject, the district councils that pay drainage law special levy this year received a one-off contribution from Treasury to meeting that cost, but that's a one-off cost. That's a one-off payment to meet what's now an annualised revenue charge. So the work has to continue across this council and other councils in Lincolnshire and beyond to systemically change the way that funding mechanism works, or to convince government, ideally, to continue to pay, because it's no good. It's no good having a one-off grant for what is now effectively that cost annually. So, not wishing to look that gift horse in the mouth, it was gratefully received, I'm sure, by all of the councils that received that money, but it did miss unitary councils that have this obligation, and it's for 1 year only. So the work absolutely has to continue. Councillor Baxter.
Thank you. Thank you for your update. It's really disappointing, not from the county's point of view, but it's really disappointing that the government have not been able to give us some clarity going forward. It's the same at district councils, where we're limping from 1 year to the next without being able to properly plan for the future. And with drainage boards, given the impending catastrophe of climate change, we really need to know at least how much is going to be there. So anything that Councillor Davey or yourself or anybody else in any authority can do to nudge the government on would be most appreciated, I'm sure. Thank you. Thank you.
Rest assured that huge efforts will continue to be made on this. Government has recognised that there is an issue, insofar as they have given us a slug of money for it. they'll need you to take it to that next stage. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Davey, following on from Friday's meeting where councillors were jumping up and down like jack-in-boxes, declaring first and foremost potholes to be dealt with due to being number one concern with residents. Concern has been shown with my residents. Is the council funding enough money into it to prevent flooding in my area? Thank you.
So is that a question for Councillor Davey? Yeah, Councillor Davey.
I believe that we are, but obviously all areas need to be very vigilant in relation to the challenges we face with weather-related incidents and climate change. And I keep this under review, and I shall be looking at it again as we go into the budget round for next year to make sure that we have enough schemes in the pipeline, we have enough funding available to deliver them. I'm content at the moment we do. If situations change, then we will need to put more money in. But at this moment in time, I'm content that we're meeting our obligations, and we'll continue to do so. I hope that answers your question, Councillor Clark.
Thank you. And Councillor Skinner, please.
Thank you, Chairman. As you know, we've worked really hard over the last 3.5–4 years on the funding gap, but it's not really a gap, it's actually a mismatch of legislation in where the districts collect the funds for another authority, and the two bits aren't tied. But unfortunately, as Councillor Clark has mentioned, you know, with the climate change and water arriving in rather large portions, the boards have all had a challenge over the last years. We've had flooding, we had Wainfleet, etc. But it actually requires all district members, new district members even, to actually keep up the effort lobbying, because a change in legislation is needed to actually resolve this situation. And they really should note the fact that it is a 1 year only payment, and as the chairman suggests, that the 10% or whatever, it goes on infinitum. And with the prices of electricity, I mean, the standing charges for the pumps now are more than what the power charges were. There's a lot of work to be done. Thank you, Chairman.
Can I add, Chairman, that Councillor Skinner is absolutely correct, that the big challenge that everyone faces are energy costs and fuel costs in terms of driving the pumps. Those prices, those costs are never going to go back down to pre-COVID levels or pre-Ukraine levels. So we do need to continue to work in partnership and to lobby government to support the drainage boards. And I will continue to use my offices and work with the districts to make whatever case is needed to ensure government hears that they need to actually take some action on this and make a final decision.
Thank you very much. I don't see any further speakers on this item, so I shall move on. Thank you very much, Councillor Dave, for your report and answering the questions of members. We have the Flood and Water team update, including section 19 investigations, and this is pages 11 to 17 of our agenda, so I shall hand over to Matthew to pick up this item for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, everybody. So, if I may, I'll take the report as read and just pick up on any pertinent points. And as seems to have been a recent trend, shortly after I've written the report during a spell of dry weather, the wet weather then intervenes before we meet in committee. So, as has been pointed out by Councillor Davey in his executive update, last weekend we had a few instances of heavy rainfall again, which caused a number of issues, and we're working through those. And also, just to bring members of the committee up to date, we obviously had some thunderstorms as well last night in a number of areas, which again appear to have perhaps caused one or two issues. We have one report of internal flooding from that so far, and also potentially some near-miss reports coming through. But obviously, that's very much a dynamic and developing situation as that's only just happened. So, officers will continue to work through those reports and respond to them accordingly. The report does outline the general position with the Section 19 reports, which is largely unchanged in the sense of the status of current and ongoing reports, subject to those new reports that have come in with the recent weather events. Also then, if I could just move on to the work streams again, just touching on some of the capital programme works. Councillor David mentioned the works in Long Bennington. I'm pleased to say that that work is on schedule to be completed towards the end of this month, and we've had some real positive feedback from that with the site works from the parish and residents, and really pleased to see that work being undertaken, which is going to better protect a significant number of properties for us. Also, work continues apace with the groundwater project, which is the DEFRA-funded project, where we secured around £7 million into the Greater Lincolnshire area to look at groundwater flooding, but also the opportunities that groundwater brings as well. The least understood, I think it's fair to say, of the sources of flood risk that we face in the area. And there's a number of initiatives which we outlined in the report, which are really gathering some momentum and some pace, and some of these are getting some recognition nationally as well, which is good to see. So quite happy that we can bring maybe a more detailed update to a future committee on some of those work strands if members would wish to see that. But again, the report outlines some of the work that is ongoing there, which hopefully you'll find interesting and informative. I will keep it very brief, Chairman, if I may, and I will leave it there for now. But as always, I'm more than happy to take any questions from members of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Colleagues, do we have any questions for Councillor Skinner, please?
Thank you. Just seeking reassurance, the good work of collecting data from all partners within the organisation, that is still going on. I mean, I know Anglian Water and the Environment and also all the boards have been reporting near misses. I think that is really, really important. And then just to comment, Chairman, that despite all this problems with keeping water where it should be, water in the next decade or so will become a challenge, and it's time that all people track this as a resource rather than a problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bonney, please.
Thank you, Chair. I was really wanting just to say thank you to Matthew and his team, along with Lincolnshire Highways, for the work which has been done in Market Raise. And I know we haven't finished the work by any means, but the work has happened. And I'm glad to say that over the last year, we've been waiting for the heavy rain to come to see if the work will work. Luckily, so far it has stood up, so thank you for that. But a couple of points on that. Firstly, it is to do with these thunderstorms. Every time there's a thunderstorm in our area, obviously, clearly, people get worried, having been flooded twice last year in August and November time. But the storms haven't actually fallen right above us yet. So it is very difficult to know what will happen, but I'm pretty confident things will be okay. But having looked at the mathematical modelling which is taking place towards looking at our fuller scheme under the Section 19, I don't want to go into that today, but to say that one of the issues that came from that was the actual recording of the rainfall that occurred on August the 16th. We were able to produce some figures as a county council, like 85 millimetres in 2 hours, or whatever it was, but it's really a bit hit and miss on that. And I'm just wondering whether there's anything we need to do to be clearer in how we can get that information more accurate. I realise it relies a lot on local weather people, but perhaps they weren't aware that their figures, if they're fed in, could make a big difference in terms of the longer term solutions. It's just something perhaps we need to be thinking about in the future.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Bunning. That's a very good point. I mean, the rainfall data is actually the really good evidence base that gives us that robust evidence for moving forward with the schemes and the data that we look at delivering. As you'll be aware, predicting summer storms, well, not summer storms, thunderstorms generally is notoriously difficult, and we've found with conducting investigations, right since the beginning of us becoming a lead local flood authority, when we took on this responsibility on the Flood and Water Management Act, that we can have locations that have received, you know, a significant amount of rainfall, and the data that we have from a rain gauge just 1 or 2 miles down the road could have recorded virtually no rainfall at all because of the localised nature of what they are. So it's been notoriously difficult to predict where the rainfall will be and also get some accurate readings of what rainfall has occurred. But the point that you make there, Councillor Bunny, I think is a valid one, and the increase in rain gauges and things like that in areas where we think there could be issues or there have been previous and known issues would be useful to support that evidence gathering for future works and future schemes. So that is certainly something that we have looked into but can continue to do so as well.
Thank you. Councillor Bunny, would you like to come?
Just a very quick, just a very quick one on that. It does occur to me that when I was at school, we used to have a Stevenson screen and we had to model it. These days, it's all done electronically, and I certainly know that at the Aston School, up to 5 years ago at any rate, they collected the water through a sensor electronically. I'm just wondering whether this is something that county councils and district councils could look to installing on their buildings. Very simple rain collection data collection, and that would actually possibly help fill in that problem that we're talking about, because as I understand, a lot of the market raised was being dealt with by a station in Tealby, which is not, whilst the district is very close, it's not actually in the town itself, but we have 5 or 6 buildings which we could easily put a small cheap device on to record data, which would be better than nothing.
Thank you. Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you, Chair. 2 questions. The first question is on the boreholes. Is there any update apart from what's in the report about the Bourne region? And the second question is when we say evidence-based, how is that affected by climate change? Whereas, you know, if it gets worse, it's just going to peak upwards. There's no, you know, I can't see how you can use evidence-based where 1 year it's going to rain a certain amount, but next year, because of climate change, it could rain a lot or it could rain less. So does that impact the way you calculate the results?
Yeah, so thank you, Councillor Clark. It's not an exact science, to be honest, but what we've been dealing with is that a lot of the information that we've got about these storms becoming more frequent, for example, and the intensity that we're dealing with them, is based on anecdotal evidence. And what we've been doing in gathering the rainfall data that we've talked about, it does start to build more of a long-term picture as the years go by. So you can then start to see trends developing, and then that can sometimes highlight where there might be areas or how frequent these storms happen. So that can then support when we go for funding. For example, if we go for national funding, the rainfall that's happened, and that can support our business case for developing a work programme for delivering schemes in these areas that have been affected. So if that goes into a priority list, that can form part of that broader evidence base that goes towards building up that case when developing schemes. So it isn't an exact science, but it's about gathering the data, and over that longer term period you can then start to see trends developing. So if we don't collect the data, it can be difficult to judge, you know, is this based on anecdotal evidence, is there actually a trend developing or not, and obviously that can then help us shape some of our future thinking as to how we deal with flood risk in the county. Regarding the boreholes with the groundwater project, the report is largely the up-to-date position with that. I would say that piece of work has been expanded beyond the wider Bourne area now. Part of the work that we're doing involves engaging with landowners and members of the public where we know there might be boreholes. We've had a relatively poor uptake with people engaging with us on that, so we have widened the area to look at other areas where we know there are boreholes, and we're working with the National Flood Forum to do some community engagement around that. And as you'll be aware, part of that is understanding where some of these boreholes are, where they're not mapped, and also where responsibility might lie for them, whether that's with any particular organisation or in some cases it might be individuals, because a lot of these boreholes are actually in private land. They're not, they could be in, some may be in people's back gardens, they may not even be aware of them. Some's in farmland as well. So a real mix, and part of the reason for doing that element of the project is to get a much better understanding of where these boreholes are, map them and understand where responsibility might lie in the future for them. So it's very much an ongoing piece of work, and hopefully at the meeting in November, if there's a will from the committee, we can perhaps bring a more detailed update to you for around that piece of work. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And I've got Councillor Beale, then Councillor Baxter. Welcome, Councillor Beale. I did welcome new district members joining us for the first time earlier on, but welcome to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Apologies for being late. I was directed to a housing meeting to begin with, but there you go. One of the issues which we have sort of obviously down in the south is getting rid of the excess rainwater that accumulates through the drainage system, mainly because they get clogged so quickly with the silt and mud, etc. If this is the wrong forum, apologies, but I want to raise it anyway, and it is how we sort of overcome that issue, please.
Yes, thank you for that. I mean, that comes down to a lot of working with our, from a county council point of view, the effective working arrangements we have with our partners. So working with internal drainage board colleagues, Anglian Water colleagues, and Environment Agency colleagues, and we do have, as you may be aware, a well-established partnership framework in the county. Some of those organisations I mentioned will have their own responsibilities for maintenance of watercourses, but wherever there's a possibility, if there are known issues, to come together and work in partnership and collaboratively to solve any particular issues, then we will do through the partnership framework. And again, I would encourage members, if they are aware of any particular issues, that they are raised, and we're more than happy to look into that and pick that up on members' behalf.
Thank you. And Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chairman. Going back to the boreholes, it was my understanding, I might be wrong, that we need to find about 80 boreholes for the project to go forward. How many have we got so far in the Bourne area?
In the wider area that we've expanded out now, we're in the region of about 40 to 50, but working with the consultants who's on it, we've got sufficient to start to build a picture of the boreholes. It is ongoing. The National Flood Forum are continuing to liaise with landowners and residents where possible. So that piece of work is ongoing, but because we've expanded it out behind the wider Bourne area, we are starting now to identify some that we can use as part of this pilot piece of work. So that is still ongoing. The National Flood Forum is still working widely in that area, and depending on the outcome of some of that engagement activity will then give us a final picture as to how many we've identified and what will feed into that particular piece of work.
Thank you very much. I don't see anyone else indicating that they wish to speak. I think we've had a useful and informed debate around that item. So I think we can say that the information has been noted, and that comments as required have been recorded. So I'm quite happy for us to move on to item 6, which is the Sustainable Urban Drainage Systems Approving Body, which is 19 to 22 of your agenda pack, and follows up on the committee's request at the May meeting that further information on the County Council's potential becoming the Sustainable Urban Drainage Systems Approving Body come to us. So in that case, I shall hand over to Warren Peppard, who will take this item forward for us. Thank you, Warren.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, committee. Yeah, the Sustainable Urban Drainage Approving Body. Those of you that have been here long enough will remember several years ago when the Flood and Water Management Act was enacted, we did a big piece of work on this to get ourselves ready for Schedule 3 being implemented. For a number of reasons, it never was, and the intention by the government at the time was to strengthen planning policy to deliver sustainable urban drainage systems through new development. Thresholds at that time were set at major developments, which is the larger ones, 10 houses and above. And due to what we probably are seeing nationally is not the uptake that government intended, an independent review has recently happened looking at the uptake nationally, and I think it's fair to say that the outcomes support that SUDs are not really being delivered as planned through planning. So what the recommendations of that review are now is to move forward with implementing Schedule 3. And what that sort of means in the simplest terms is that unitary or upper-tier authorities will become an approving body. It doesn't replace flood risk considerations as part of planning, more than sort of working alongside it. So this is really about the sort of the technical detail in the approval aspects of drainage systems on developments moving forward. Just picking up on a few of the comments which have been going around the room. This work relates to new developments, and again, I think it's fair to say that there's been some common words used this morning around using water as a resource, mitigating flood risk, working with partnerships, and the use of data gathering and information that we have locally. What we hope, or what the intention is locally, is that using the current partnership arrangements that we've got, i.e. the management groups, the local drainage groups, etc., the key piece of work in establishing the project for us is about that partnership engagement. So when we do be established as the approval body, the county won't be working in isolation. We are currently talking to all of our RMAs, whether that's the water and sewage companies, the EA, the IDBs, and others, to understand how we can all play a part in this. And again, the intention will be that once we are established as the approving body, this will be a collaborative approach. We will be formally consulting with all RMAs to understand their concerns, so we can have access to any sort of data that they hold, so that when we do get into granting approval, we have the fullest picture that we can to make the right decisions. And again, this is about capturing water as it falls on new developments. The existing threshold, like I said, in the planning system is around majors. We understand the thresholds will change to any sort of single property connecting to a system. This will increase, probably in numbers terms, the opportunity for SUDs to increase on probably 200 plus sites in Lincolnshire to probably 4,000 plus sites per annum. So there's going to be a massive increase in volume where we would now expect SUDs to be delivered on sites. Again, we are awaiting government consultation around the detail. We did expect that to be summer this year, but speaking to DEFRA now, the intention, it looks like it's going to be pushed to November. Again, the project team which has been established was working to an implementation day of April next year. But again, I think because of the delay to the consultation, messages coming out from DEFRA is that implementation date is likely to be pushed forward now, or pushed back rather, to the end of next year. So what we're doing currently is we're in very much the information gathering stages. I do refer in the report to the fact that Schedule 3 was enacted in Wales a couple of years ago. And the reason why I've included that is because we're having lots and lots of meetings with our colleagues over the border in Wales to understand how it's working there, any lessons learned we can gather, so we're in the sort of best position we can be when Schedule 3 is enacted. The key challenge is there is a section in the paper, but at the moment what we're currently focusing on is that collaborative across authority working. We're giving some thought at the moment around costs, funding and maintenance costs for these assets when we become the approving body. And again, it's fair to say these key challenges have been raised with DEFRA, and we fully expect this to be included in the suite when the consultation comes out later this year. I'll stop talking now and offer any questions to the committee.
Thank you very much for a good, useful and detailed run-through of those key issues. I think, just very briefly from my mind, it's incredible that this has been kicking around since 2011, that we've seen SUDs rolled out since 2015, with an ever-increasing number of developments relying on them. And here we are in 2023, finally, government getting around to making this stuff happen. But I'm quite happy to open it up to colleagues for debate. Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the report. It was really informative, and the presentation around it. I mean, obviously, this is something that needs to happen to protect us going forward from flooding, especially on new developments. But the thing that worries me is this going to be another scheme which brought in by government and expecting us to pick up the bill. I know it's in there as costs and funding have been looked at. How are we likely to be funded? Have we had any hints as how we're going to be funded for this work? Because obviously it's going to take extra resource to do it, not just with us, but for the other risk management authorities as well that we'll be engaging with. So I just wondered if we've got any more feedback on that, please, Warren.
Yes, thank you. Nothing concrete. I think you used the word hints, so I will use that myself. What we're getting at the moment from talking to national groups and to DEFRA is that funding and costs is obviously going to be a key component in the consultation. I think what government's views are at the moment in relation to the approving body staffing costs, they're looking at the fee element which we can charge to cover that. But I think the biggest concern to DEFRA at the moment and to industry wide is the ongoing sort of maintenance costs for these assets, which we'll have to look after. What they're considering at the moment are sort of 3 streams which they've mentioned to me, and they've only been a mention, so we are awaiting the consultation to see what's included in that. But the ideas are around sort of commuted sums, which will be a charge on developers. There's another debate taking place around whether or not we get some sort of rebate from the water and sewage company for their surface water charging, or the scariest one is that we become a charging authority and start charging any householders which connect to our systems. But this is very much the sort of scary area, I think, at the moment for central government. So we fully expect this to be in the consultation. And again, I think what we expect is that once we've seen it and we're sort of drafting our response, then the responses, I think, should probably be brought back to this committee for oversight before we send anything back.
Thank you. Yes, very happy to have those responses come back for consideration in due course. Councillor Baxter, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. I'm trying to work out what it's going to do. This is something that really pushes my buttons because I get lots of complaints from people living on new estates where the SUDS is either not delivered as it appeared on the original plan, or when it is finished, it just looks blooming dangerous. The planners present to the district councils a set of houses with kind of, in the pictures, there's children skipping gaily through the meadows, and these SUDs are kind of just almost a play feature, and they're included within the public open space. But when they're built, they're often behind fences, either metal or wooden. They are deep, so that if the ball is kicked down and runs down, then children are in danger. There's 2 in the deepings, one particularly that does look like some kind of industrial infrastructure. I wonder if having a sustainable urban drainage system board is going to prevent them happening in the first place, and if they're not built as planned, does anyone have any teeth to chase for developers to say, that's not what you said you were going to build, why have you done it, fix it? Thank
Yes, we hope this will absolutely strengthen that side of the issues, because I think it's fair to say the way the current arrangements work is that flood risk and how a site will be drained are sort of principal considerations as part of the planning process. At the moment, a number of different authorities or entities, if you like, can look after SUDs once they've been implemented. So that could be us as a highway authority, a water and sewage company, or management companies. I think what the SAB will give us is the teeth to make sure that what is actually being built post-planning is fit for purpose. We will be working to national standards which government are still working on, but our role as the approving body will be the technical approval of the system. It will be the opportunity to be out on site to making sure that actually what is being built is what's been approved. It will obviously give us tools to adopt the system going forward as well. But more importantly, we will also have enforcing powers to make sure that the systems which were intended to be built as part of planning actually appear on the ground. So we hope, with fingers crossed, that the consultation and the national standards will support this, but we firmly believe that once the SAB is enacted, it will give us those sort of local teeth and powers to make sure things on the ground are actually what we expected.
Thank you. Councillor Clark, please.
Thanks, Chair. If I heard right, there's going to be a vast increase in workload. How is that workload going to be carried out? You know, have we enough people to actually achieve it or not?
Currently, no. I think it's fair to say we're going to be in the same position as the other authorities in the country. Again, it was a point that we raised with DEFRA when we spoke to them about the whole of the country potentially is going to be going out at the same time to try and recruit the additional resource that will be necessary. We're taking a bit of a risk-based approach at the moment and sort of thinking staff numbers, what this means for the county. And again, we're still waiting for the burden assessments to understand what government's thinking are, but we are looking at potentially an increase in staff of probably between 15 to sort of 25 officers at the moment because of the workload. Again, speaking to colleagues in recruitment, we're trying to get ahead of the game. We already know that we need to plan sort of 6 to sort of 9 months in advance to go out to advert. And again, what we're trying to do is be a little bit cleverer, because those that know SUDs, it's not just about traditional drainage and getting rid of water. There are other elements which are equally as important in SUDs around amenity value, biodiversity and water quality. So again, we have lots of skills within the county in relation to sort of getting rid of water, but what we will be looking to strengthen is those sort of softer skills around amenity, green space type of officers. So we hope that when we go to recruitment, we're going to sort of target an audience which hopefully the rest of the country aren't targeting, which will hopefully help us.
Thank you very much. Councillor Andrew Haigh, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I've never been a huge fan of SUD schemes on developments, partly for what the comments that Councillor Baxter brought up, that partly because they require significant maintenance, whereas the old schemes prior to SUDs, you all went into a balancing lagoon into part of the site, and that could be maintained a lot easier than SUD schemes. SUD schemes that the grasses have to be cut at different levels and what have you to achieve certain things. You've got permeable areas, whereas before you had areas where the water just used to run off. I also wonder on the detail of Schedule 3, that once planning permission has been granted for a development, a developer has a right to connect into the existing system, which is usually Anglian water system, providing the pipe is not larger than the pipe that it's going into. Now, this system could be the same as what we do at the moment, which is perhaps throttle it back and provide on-site storage. But I just think that the maintenance of these, it's great. It's great seeing it in paper, and we all want as much water to go back into the ground as possible for future use. But I'm not sure that the detail of this is actually being worked out properly. Thank you.
Again, speaking to DEFRA, we fully expect the new suite of national standards to be part of the consultation later this year. I don't think it's an uncommon view that SUDs can be seen as a sort of a significant maintenance liability as opposed to the traditional. But having worked in SUDs for a number of years, I think the wrong SUD systems can cause problems, but the right SUD systems could address a lot of issues. And again, I think that's where the big piece of work will happen once we see the sort of national standards. It's how we interpret those, work with our partnering authorities to get the right SUD systems in Lincolnshire, which serve those multifunctional purposes and are, lower down on the sort of maintenance cost metrics than the higher end of things. I think as well, from what I've seen, the automatic right to connect to public sewers will be removed as part of Schedule 3. But again, I think that level of detail again will come through in the consultation later on this year.
Thank you. Jonathan, you'd like to come in, please?
Yeah, just to pick up on that, Warren's correct. So the automatic right to connect surface water to the public sewer is removed when Schedule 3 is enacted. That right to connect then becomes conditional on approval from the SUDS approving body. So, and Warren picked up on this earlier. This is why it's so important that we end up working really closely together and working in collaboration, because ultimately, you're right, a lot of those connections will be to the public sewer eventually. So we need to make sure that those connections are appropriate. But Schedule 3 will remove that automatic right to connect. The right to connect foul sewage remains, obviously, from a public health perspective, of course, but it's the surface water right that is removed.
Thank you very much for clarifying that. Does anyone else wish to speak on this? Councillor Skinner.
Thank you, Chairman. Thanks, Warren. A real good report. The planning bit does actually present you with lots of problems, because within a local plan, depending on which section of houses are brought forward, can actually change the way it's drained and where it goes to. So when plans come into place, I think there ought to be a lot more work done on the infrastructure to decide where a sensible way of draining this is. And just another bit regarding what you do with water is rainwater harvesting has been around for quite a time now, and yet we're not seeing it in new houses. And picking up on what Jonathan says, it is always going to be a balance act on the flat with flat sewerage, because you need a certain amount of water to flush the unmentionables through. So it is a very hard balancing act, and I wish them good luck with that one. Thank you.
Yeah, just to add to that, very good points. We are continue to work closely with our planning colleagues. They are a key RMA in all of this work, and again, I think the success of the approving body will be that relationship with our planning colleagues, because SAB will not remove, like I said earlier, the thought process that needs to take place in relation to flood risk as part of the planning process. And again, rainwater harvesting, very good point. Again, we hope that the national standards will be strengthened enough around the whole hierarchy of discharge choice. For those that know it in detail, the first thing we should be looking at in relation to discharge is water reuse. Then we can move on to infiltration, connect to sewers, connect to compound sewers, etc. So again, we hope, and it's a lot of hope at the moment because we haven't seen it, that the national standards will be strengthened to make sure that things like rainwater harvesting and water reuse, where it falls, become even more prominent.
Thank you. Jonathan?
Yeah, sorry, just to build on that again. So, well, you're right, rainwater harvesting's been around for forever, really, isn't it? So, but I suppose the challenge that we have at the moment is why is the uptake not greater? So we are leading an industry-wide project at the moment called Enabling Water Smart Communities, which is looking, obviously rainwater harvesting is one method of harvesting water and using it as a resource, as you said earlier, rather than thinking of it as a waste. So Anglia Water are leading this project for the wider industry. It's an Ofwat funded innovation project looking at what are the blockers to the uptake of this sort of stuff. So working very closely with developers, not just private developers, but public developers as well, and trying to understand what we can do to enable the uptake of this type of stuff more so in the future than we have at the moment.
Councillor Haigh.
Thank you for letting me come back again, Chairman. I've got two questions. Well, one question is, does the introduction of Schedule 3, will that make Anglian Water a statutory consultee in planning? And if it doesn't, I can see problems for Anglian Water for future developments. And the second point was one of the reasons why grey water isn't reused as a rule is because you've got to have a totally different set of pipe work in the house so that there's no cross contamination between drinking water and grey water. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. And just if I can just come in quickly before you answer that one, do these proposals give the County Council and Lead Local Flood Authority any additional purchase in its consultation responses through the planning process? Does this help or hinder in any respect? Thank you.
Shall I start, Warren, and then? Yeah. So you probably saw me shaking my head. So yeah, it won't make us a statutory consultee to the planning process. So, yeah. So we're very conscious of that, and it's something that we've been pushing for and campaigning for good on decade now, to make us a statutory consultee long before Schedule 3 kind of will come forward. So partly because of that, because we know we are an enabler for growth, and having greater, I suppose, understanding and say of the planning, what's going on in the world of planning would have a big impact, I think, in terms of not just water but also sewage, from a sewage perspective as well. So yes, that's why, and Warren touched on it earlier, and I mentioned it as well, that this close working relationship will be absolutely key. If we're not a statutory consultee, how do we make sure we enable that to ensure that we are kind of working hand in glove with each other, when it comes to future planning applications. So just quickly on your second point about a third pipe basically system, that's absolutely one of the challenges of why the uptake of things like rainwater harvesting haven't been successful. But if you look in Australia, where they're much more successful at this than we are, they have a well-embedded process where you now have purple pipes, and purple pipes are grey water. So you know from a very young age that you don't drink from a purple pipe because you might get sick. So, and we're clearly not in that space at the moment, but looking to the future, that's somewhere we could absolutely get to.
Thank you.
In relation to the question on an increased strength in planning, I don't believe, and again we wait for the consultation, that the formal statutory consultation arrangements as part of the planning process will change. I expect the LLFA to remain as the stat consultee on surface water flood risk. Where we will see an uplift in power, probably, will be the change in the threshold. So, like I referred to earlier, the current threshold for the stat consultee to kick in is on major developments, which currently are about 250 a year across the authority. with the new thresholds, we see us as having a role as a statutory consultee for up to 4,000 now. So that's where I think the increase in our strength will be in relation to flood risk matters in planning.
Thank you very much. That feels to be particularly helpful. I don't see anyone else wishing to come in on this item, so thank you once again. Oh, yes, I did. Sorry, I have got you down. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. I'll keep it brief because some of this hasn't been covered. Interested in a conversation regarding rainwater capture and water storage, because we also discussed this when we produced the Scrutiny report on supporting agriculture and farming. Some answers have just been given, but it'd be interesting to have a further update at these future meetings on this subject, so advice and guidance can be provided, and also any information on the successful schemes which operate in the county. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I very much imagine this is not the last we've heard of this scheme, and I'm very happy to have future updates as ever they might be relevant to this committee. I don't see anyone else. Any final comments, Warren?
Other than absolutely happy to come with future updates, I've noted obviously the 20th of November committee. Hopefully we will have a bit more understanding by that time on the sort of the government's consultation, so we can bring an update on that. Again, in relation to good sites in Lincolnshire, we have been delivering good sites, I think, in Lincolnshire for many, many years. We do hold a number of delegations throughout the year with neighbouring authorities where they actually come along, see what's working well in Lincolnshire to learn from us. And again, maybe one for the summer when it's not raining, but again, if the committee wants to have tours of successful sud sites in Lincolnshire, not just the good ones, but the bad ones as well, so we can all learn, then again, that's something we can obviously support.
Thank you very much. I think we'd look forward to that for hopefully our site visit next year. I think we've noted the progress with the establishment of a sustainable urban drainage systems approving body, and I think we have noted any comments, and obviously that we will pick this up in future meetings as relevant. So if you're content with that, I shall move on to item 7, which is the Environment Agency update, pages 23 to 42, which is our regular Environment Agency report, and I'll hand over to Morgan for that, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try and keep it brief and leave it largely as read as other items. For new members, just a reminder on our beach renourishment campaign has been completed this year. So for new members, this is our sort of annual cycle of pumping sand from further out to sea onto the shoreline. This helps to protect the flood defences from wave action mostly during sort of large storms on the east coast. So that work again has been completed this year. Further, as Councillor Davey mentioned, working in sort of close partnership with other partners on our Enhancing the Coast programme. So this is to establish, fully understand the future risk from flooding from the coast, and that work's ongoing, as Councillor Davey stated. Wainfleet, we've got our scheme, which we're currently working towards the outline business case to deliver. So this is work on the raised defences for the community. So we're looking to deliver this within our 6-year programme by 2027. We held a drop-in event at Wainfleet for the community in July, which was attended by ourselves and other partners in this room. So thanks to them for their participation. It was reasonably well attended, and certainly people with the biggest sort of queries sort of came along and were able to field those, and we had some quite good discussions on the day. We were able to explain also that we'd completed some natural flood management work in the upper catchment, which will help to slow the flow of water down towards the community. In Boston, we're, as you know, we've completed the barrier to protect over nearly 14,000 homes and businesses within the community. We've still got some work to finish off there to complete some work around the wet dock entrance. That work is proving quite complex to plan and to finish off, but current timescales is to complete that work by 2025. We've done a lot of work in partnership on our Lower Witham strategy. So we recently completed a benefits apportionment exercise, again with partners here and amongst our internal drainage board partners. Apportioning the benefits is really important in flood risk work because the government rules don't allow for sort of double counting, so each asset has to be apportioned a certain number of the benefits from a catchment. So where you've got this sort of multi-layered approach of IDBs, ourselves and other risk management authorities, each looking to promote schemes within that area, it's important that we do agree how we apportion those benefits. And that's allowed us to put in recently our outline business case for works arising out of the Lower Witham strategy. So these are sort of immediate works which will need to be done within the 6-year programme up to 2027. The River Slee scheme, again, progressing well. We've had a recent really good engagement event in the community to look at some of the options from the scheme. The Fens 2100 plus, which I've mentioned, we've continued to build the project team there. So this is to look at the whole of the Fens catchments, right across our patch, Lincolnshire, and obviously further down towards sort of Cambridgeshire as well. So we've got a programme team being developed there. We had a launch workshop in June, which was well attended again by partners here. And we'll be looking forward to sort of progressing that work in due course. And I think we've said that that team will potentially come to this meeting in due course to give a more fuller update. As well as our incident management work, we've continued quite a lot of training prior to the summer, sort of summer training for our incident management staff, and we're just looking at our sort of winter ready training for our staff. So this will include things like preparing for potential for East Coast tidal surge to make sure all our duties team are well prepared and understand the processes involved there. Our maintenance work continues afoot with our partners, again using our public sector cooperation agreement, and also we're developing and delivering our capital maintenance programme. So I've given an example there of some work on the Fosdyke, which has been progressing this year. Includes some work to sort of remove badgers from the site there. I'll leave it at that, and Mr. Chairman, and take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, just to pick up at the first thing you mentioned there with the Salt Fleet to Gibraltar Point, I'm very privileged myself to be able to see some of that beach renourishment work in progress, and perhaps as with the last item, if we're looking for places to go and visit as a committee next summertime, if we can do something to coincide with that work ongoing, I think that would be really helpful and useful for colleagues to be able to see. Colleagues, do you have any questions for Councillor Austin?
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you for letting me come in front of some of the committee members should they wish to ask a question. And I apologise for being late, but there was nowhere to park by the even money we've got here. Right, my question for Morgan is based, really, as you can probably imagine, around the works relating to the barrier. First question was, and maybe you could just expand upon what you said. As my first question is, when are the new gates going to be installed at the Port of Boston? They were brought upriver on the 4th of June 2021. We watched them arrive. I have a photograph, and nothing has happened since. Now, you did say, well, it's complex, so complicated, so maybe you could expand on that. Now, shall I give you all three questions? Right, the next one, it's all relating to the same area. When is the bank alongside the haven from London Road through to the industrial estate going to be reopened, please? Residents are concerned. This is part of the national path called the Macmillan Way, and it can only be accessed via a ramp partway through the industrial estate, which really is an inappropriate public access point. And my third question, again, relates to that same bit of riverbank. The riverbank immediately behind the houses at the top of Wiverton Low Road is fenced off with temporary fencing, and it's inaccessible for residents to maintain. It's got thistles spreading there down all over everywhere, and various other weeds. It's supposedly, the rumour has it, too steep for the EA to maintain either. And I believe, in fact, there are still legal discussions over where the actual boundary of the gardens and the EA's bank are. So what will the EA do, first of all, to maintain its own bank, which I think it's finding is too steep? And then the rest of it is just get sorted out with these legal matters, please. Right, so sorry that's rather a lot, but it all relates to the same immediate area. Otherwise, I'm very happy with the barrier. Thank you.
Thank you, Morgan.
Thank you, Councillor Austin. On your second 2 points, and they're kind of related to the first point, and I believe they're dependent on the works around the wet dock being completed. And again, around the wet dock completion, as I said, you know, it is quite complex and involves, as you said, you know, arranging activities around that wet dock entrance. I can't expand too much more on that. I would refer to our programme director to give more details on that. I can take that one away and come back to you in due course, or ask our programme director for Boston to get back to you on that one.
Thank you.
Can I just say thank you to Councillor Ashton? I wanted these questions asked in a public forum. I know I can go into the EA hub at the end of the road, but I wanted them to be on record for the public to know that these questions have been asked and there are still answers required. Thank you.
Understood, thank you.
Thank you. And just for clarity, I appreciate, Councillor Austin, you're not a member of this committee, but the same as with any member of the County Council who has issues affecting their division, I'm very happy for them to come here and ask them. Councillor Bunny, please.
Thank you. I appreciate that the larger rivers and everything and watercourses will take priority in many ways in terms of both the amount of money spent on them and also the work needed. But I'm interested in the smaller rivers. I'm trying to, well, the Raise is the one, but there are others going through Waddingham and so on, where the reed collection and the bank clearance used to occur quite regularly. And I think we're actually getting less occasions. I might be wrong on that, but it seems to be less. But certainly the weed in the rivers and on the banks is growing a lot quicker with climate changes and so on. And I'm just wondering whether, in fact, this is something that we're going to find that we are either not, the Environment Agency hasn't got as much resources as it used to do to manage those, and it might have to be falling back on other people, or whether in fact it's just one of those things which will eventually get caught up.
Thank you. Our maintenance activities aren't planned on the size of the river. It's the size of the flood risk connected to those activities. So obviously, you know, through urban areas have fairly small watercourses, but you know that they still give rise to a significant amount of flood risk. So it's based on the flood risk rather than the size of the river that we concentrate our maintenance activities. I can't comment too specifically on the watercourses you mentioned, but if there are any concerns about maintenance in particular locations, by all means get back to me afterwards, and I'll ask our ops teams to respond. But certainly, yeah, funding is a challenge across everyone's activities. We've seen, large sort of levels of inflation, which do impact on what we can deliver, certainly across the board. So, but what I would say, yeah, get back to us, and I can ask our ops teams to respond.
Thank you, Councillor Bunny.
Thank you. Thank you for that, and I appreciate the flood risk, etc. I think there's an aesthetic thing for some of our villages, which responds to tourism and so on, which can be the same in the major rivers as well. But under highways, we have a sort of inspection regime, which whether it's sufficient or not is a different matter, but we do actually have one where, in theory, and practice, the inspectors come out and look at the roads on a regular basis. Is there such a scheme for how often that the rivers are looked at in that scheme?
Yes, there is, yeah. We do have a regime of inspections of all our assets and water courses. Again, the frequency of that is based on risk. So obviously higher risk assets and locations are inspected more often than other locations. But yeah, we do have that inspection regime.
And just very quickly, is that regime published, that sort of frequency published for those smaller parish councils to find out when it should be?
I'll have to come back to you. Certainly the results are made available. So certainly we publish information about our assets which are at the right condition or not, and we have various targets around that. So yes, they're available.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ashley-Morrick, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the eternal question, I'm afraid. River Witham through Boston is rock solid green. Very little, no sort of sign of anything, doing anything about it. It goes right back to Langrick Bridge, which I cross sort of on a daily basis. The boatyard there, or boat moorings, all of those are marooned because they can't move. Every single time we ask, we seem to be told someone will come back to us, something will be done. I wonder if you could reassure me that something has been. Thank you.
Well, I know my colleague has been working with partners with the Canal and River Trust as well, because it's not an issue which is easily solved by one partner by themselves. So certainly there are partners looking at this. I can't give an update at the moment to say exactly what the latest situation is, but certainly I think this year I don't think it's been as, you might say that I'm wrong here, but not quite as bad as previous years, but certainly we do recognise it as a significant problem.
I think if I can just go on, Councillor.
I really do appreciate, we do get this, well, everyone's looking at it, well, we're all looking at it, and it's green and thick, and there seems to be no evidence. Last year there was what looked like a adapted pedalo trolling about, cutting little bits, but other areas seem to do a whole lot better. I mean, my personal experience of the Kennet Naven in Somerset, where they've got weed cutting boats that plough through it and cut the weed, because it's a big tourist thing down there, and obviously more so than up here. But this does seem to be, every year we know it's going to happen, and we don't have the equipment, and everyone looking at it is sort of accompanied by everyone in the town who's also looking at it. Last year we had the issue where for some reason it went through Black Sluice, which is in the middle of the town more or less, and the entire, which actually happens to be my area, London Road, where the fishing boats are, was plastered in rotting weed. So we do know it's going to happen, and we don't seem to respond. So is there any chance possibly that we could have a report that tells us at least what's being done or what people are attempting? Thank you.
Morgan.
Yeah, I'm happy to bring that back at the next meeting.
Thank you very much. I mean, just to pick up on that, from conversations that I've had with people that use the river and use the with boats, whilst the visual surface weed hasn't been as intense this year as it was perhaps last year, you know, the sort of green weed that everyone sees, the weed below the surface has still been incredibly challenging for navigation. I suppose the question from me would be, do we know what effect the weed, the subsurface weed, has on the conveyance of the river? Appreciate we're reassured that the river can do everything that it needs to do in terms of conveyance of water, and that the weed is effectively a navigational issue. But I can't help thinking, with that volume of weed in the channel, that would act as a brake on water needing to come down the Witham, should we have particularly high levels of summer rainfall. If you could comment around that, please.
I think, I mean, obviously it depends on the type of weed and the location. I think what we have seen where we do get that higher rainfalls, that it does flush the system through quite well. So I think the impact on flood risk in this location, not necessarily all locations, is not as great as others. Obviously, there's a balance between managing weed for flood risk purposes, and that in that case, if it was a big issue around flood risk, we would look to try and deal with that more as opposed, you know, with aesthetics. You know, we're not funded for treating rivers for aesthetic reasons. So if we were to manage a watercourse for aesthetic reasons, it would mean taking funding away from another place for flood risk purposes. So it's a very, very careful and sort of fine balance.
Thank you very much. Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you, Chair. I can't remember if it was 3 or 4 years ago this was raised, and the issue was put to the side, saying the green stock weed, you know, there's no harm. Then I think it was last year, it came really heavy, and I think Councillor Austin brought it up, you know, how badly it was in Boston. Also, the River Witham. You know, what I'm saying is, I walk down the riverbank yearly for about the past 20 years, and it's only just becoming a problem. Why is it becoming a problem? And can anything be done about, you know, before it actually grows?
Yeah, I think there's all sorts of work being looked at, not, you know, looking into this issue. Certainly warmer summers are having an impact. You know, it's good conditions for weed to grow. So certainly potentially climate change is one of the reasons for this. Where we don't receive the rainfall, as we sort of said before, if there's a long dry period, it doesn't flush the weed through so readily. So a combination of those two factors over the last few years has sort of provided those sort of perfect conditions for weed growth. And we've not just seen it in the Witham, we've seen it in the Ancombe as well, in the north. And I believe, I refer to my IDB colleagues, but certainly in some of the smaller drains as well, I think we've been seeing a lot of weed growth over certainly the drier, warmer summers in the last couple of years.
Thank you, Councillor Skinner.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just going to declare an interest as a river user, but it has been problemsome again this year for all of the clubs on the Witham that use the Witham. In particular, the people that like going in long straight lines backwards, the rowers, they're finding it particularly difficult. But amongst all this, it's not all algae. There's a couple of invasive species amongst there that I think really do need tackling, and tackling good. And regarding my colleague in front, the weed actually goes from Tattershall Bridge. I cycled down the side of the river, and more of a concern, it's starting to change colour now. So I'd be looking for reassurances to maintain our navigation in Boston. And also it's hit the marina pretty seriously the last 4 or 5 years, as a business. If that weed's hanging around and it's not particularly fragrant, it does damage their business at the marina. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any point they'd like to raise? Morgan, any final comments?
No, that's fine. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. In which case, it seems very much the case that we have noted the Environment Agency report on their projects and the capital schemes, and I think we've also captured any comments that are pertinent to the issue that members have insightfully raised. So with your agreement, I'm content. I shall move on to item 8, which is the Anglian Water update, and we have a presentation from Jonathan Glerham and Matt Moore. So I'll hand over to you, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Jess, is there any way you can make me a presenter on Teams, please, so I can present? So just while we're doing that, so just quick introduction. So for those of you that don't know me, I know we've got a few new members here today. So Jonathan Glerham, I'm our regional flood and coastal manager. So I lead our kind of flood risk and our coastal bathing water engagement work. So, and I've got my colleague Matt here today. So, so what I wanted to do was it'll be a bit of a recap for existing members and a bit of an update for new members around the kind of, I suppose, the role of Anglian Water and what we do to particularly manage flood risk. But I will touch on a few other areas, particularly storm overflows and our investment around the kind of the environment as well. So, how are we doing? Oh, okay, that's fine. And while I do that, just a little bit of just a little bit of AOB, which I'll do now. So this this might be my last kind of official meeting of this group. So from the beginning of October, I take on a new role within Anglian Water as our head of sustainable growth. So still very relevant to this committee, and the work that I'm doing at the moment around kind of flood risk and bathing water, that will continue to report to me going forward, and Matt will continue, you know, that kind of continuity. So, but obviously, as has been touched on earlier, particularly by Colin, you know, the importance around kind of flood risk and the coast for kind of growth across the region is hugely important. So, so yeah, so I'm looking forward to starting that role. One of the key things that I'll be involved in that role will be the new reservoirs as well. So, of course, lots of overlap and lots of relevance to this committee. So I'm sure it won't be the last time I'm here, but it might be the last time I'm here on a regular basis. So, so I still don't seem to have a share button, just so you know. So, well, I'll go for it whilst, and hopefully the slides will kind of catch up in due course. So what I wanted to do for particularly for new members is just give a bit of an overview of Anglian Water and the kind of area that we cover and the work that we do. So, so we have over 4 million water customers and over 6 million wastewater customers across a region that spans from the Humber to the Thames and from Lowestoft to Leicestershire. So it's big, it's massive. We're the largest water company by geographical area in England and Wales. So Scotland's the only one that's bigger than us. So so it's a huge area, and as such, as you can imagine, as is a lot of particularly Lincolnshire, it's mainly made up of kind of remote rural areas. So for that reason, we have a lot of assets. So we have nearly 40,000 kilometres of water supply pipes and nearly 80,000 kilometres of sewers. And we have a large number of assets that kind of treat the water, whether it's putting fresh water into supply or taking kind of dirty water. So from a flood risk perspective, obviously we're probably most interested on the sewer network. So as part of that, so we talk about sewer catchments. So we've got 1,257 separate sewer catchments, of which the vast majority, 95% of those will be really quite small catchments. And we have a small number of, big places like Lincoln and Northampton and Norwich and Milton Keynes and places like that. So, but the vast majority are very small catchments that serve a small number of people. And as such, we've got over 4,000 pumping stations, because obviously a lot of the region that we cover is also very flat, so we don't have gravity on our side, unfortunately, to help us out in terms of moving that water. So I think that 4,000 pumping stations is something like a quarter of all pumping stations across the whole of the country, just in the east of England. So, and that's just the nature of our geography, of course. So, and I do have a nice picture, which those of you who've been here before will have seen. But if you put all our pipe work together, I think it's just our sewers together. That'll take you around the equator twice. So it gives you an idea of the sheer length of assets that we manage. So, and I've touched on some of it already, but we are, particularly vulnerable to certain issues. So we've touched a bit, Morgan, you were talking about kind of a changing climate. So there's a number of issues that touch on us. So obviously we generally have lower rainfall across the east of England, but when it does come, and Matthew talked about this earlier, trying to predict where those kind of high intensity, normally summer thunderstorms come is really particularly tricky. So, and certainly the kind of warmer east of England, makes it more susceptible to that type of weather. We have a very, very long coastline as well, so particularly relevant when we have those kind of winter storms that might combine into kind of sort of tidal surge of some description. So, and our assets on the coastline are particularly vulnerable to that. So, but then looking kind of more generally, and we touched on growth earlier, but we are, in a part of the country that serves a really important role for the rest of the nation, so particularly around agriculture. So, and this I think is where the new reservoirs come in, around, obviously helping to enable both the future growth, not only of housing growth, but of growth of industries across the region. So, right, looks like I might be a presenter now, so let's see if I can share my slides. Yes, I can. Brilliant. Thanks, Jess. So, let me just make that full screen. There we go. Lovely. So we have a really, really kind of important role to play, and I think in terms of housing growth as well, which will be kind of particularly relevant to my new role that I take on. So, it depends what stats you look at, but I think 4 of the 5 fastest growing sort of towns and cities in England are in the east of England. And there's significant growth planned across the whole of our region. So, so I wanted to just touch on our purpose as well. So I mentioned this last time. So we are a purpose-driven company, and what does that mean? So you can see our purpose there. But so we are the first utility in the UK that's enshrined purpose in our Articles of Association. So it means now that our board of directors, and that's not just our management board, that's our board of investors as well, rather than it just being about making a profit for those investors, they now have to take account of our purpose, which is around bringing environmental and social prosperity to the region that we serve. They have to take those two things have equal weight now on our board. They're not, making profit is more important. Those two things are equally important. So any decisions that we make now are based around our purpose. And rightly so, I had the challenge that when I was here last time talking about this, about what does that actually mean? It's some nice words, but what does it mean? So I've pulled together this slide just to kind of help show what we look at when we try and review how we are doing against our purpose. There's lots of text on there, so I'm not going to go through all of it. But principally, what we do is we set our kind of how we kind of, I suppose, rank ourselves against our purpose against what we call the 6 capitals. So those are around the environment, social, manufactured capital, intellectual capital, people, and financial. So, and that 6 capitals approach is extremely well embedded within the business now, but it's something that a lot of businesses are now doing in terms of looking at how you, I suppose, identify the kind of ultimately the costs and benefits of the work that we do. It's not just now about the bottom line, it's about the broader benefits that we can deliver to society, and the 6 capitals approach is a way of measuring that. So, and there's a few things here around what we measure ourselves on, I think, which are particularly relevant to this committee. So we'll touch on it hopefully in more detail in November, particularly around kind of pollutions and spills to the environment. we capture data, all our data around that. We've obviously got something on there under social around internal flooding to customers, but we also have things on there around helping those who are struggling to pay. We will look at and metrics around that. we have something on there around risk of sewer flooding in a storm. That's a broader metric that our regulator Ofwat kind of asks us to look at. We look at our bathing waters. So, Colin touched on the coast earlier. So we look at the quality of our bathing waters across the region. And I think I'm right in saying, just while we're on the subject, that all the bathing waters across Lincolnshire are excellent. So there are only 2 sort of good bathing waters in the kind of greater Lincolnshire area, I think, are in northeast Lincolnshire. So that's excellent news in terms of the kind of, from a tourism perspective. So there's a whole host, I'm not going to go through all of them, but there's a whole host of metrics there that we measure ourselves on around how we are delivering against that purpose. So, and that is obviously reported up to the board and all our kind of relevant stakeholders. And then just in terms of kind of strategic priorities, so I touched on this last time, but the important thing here is that we plan for the long term, and we take a really long-term approach about how we look to invest for the future. So I just focus on that kind of upper left-hand quadrant of with those boxes there. So we have a number of kind of strategic things that we look at. So our WRMP, that's our Water Resources Management Plan, and we've been doing water resources management planning for a long time, and that's what has led us to the need for the new reservoirs that you'll all be familiar with. So, but we also now do long-term planning from a sewage perspective as well. So that's a drainage and wastewater management plan, and the guys, Matt, your team at Lincolnshire would have been part of the engagement as we built that. Because obviously flood risk is central to that. We also look very closely at our WINEP, so that's our Water Industry Natural Environment Programme, so that's our investment in the environment, and also net zero. So we have a commitment to be net zero by 2030, so which obviously is a significant challenge for us, particularly, as I mentioned earlier, with all the kind of treatment process and all that pumping. It takes a lot of energy to pump water. Water is heavy. So how we get ourselves to that point, it will be a real challenge. So. And we really do focus on the long term. So those strategies down the left-hand side really look out on a 25-year process. And we now are tasked with developing a long-term delivery strategy. So Ofwat have asked us to look at that going forward as well. So how are we going to deliver across the long term, and what sort of adaptive approaches will we be using to think about what's coming over the hill in terms of those challenges for the future, and how will we adapt to that? Something that I know the Environment Agency have been looking at in terms of their own delivery strategies for a while now, this kind of adaptive approach, and this is what we're being challenged to look at as well. And then just finally on this slide, just touch on the bottom left-hand quadrant. We're doing business planning at the moment, and we are in the PR24 business plan box, and that kind of those left-hand boxes. As part of PR24, we've been challenged to look at things, cross-cutting things. So in the past, we would have developed business plans. It was just, right, we'll just fix this flooding problem here, and we'll fix that water problem there. And now we're looking at, how can we work with others to do that? We've been really successful on a flood risk side doing that for a long term. And I think the work that we do in Lincolnshire is a big part of the business now, thinking we need to take more of a place-based approach now. And how can we work with others to do that? So our partnership approach, particularly to kind of flood risk management, and particularly what we've done here is a real kind of trailblazer for the business for that. And I think Matt and I are particularly proud of the work that we do, to try and manage flood risk across Lincolnshire. So, and then just in terms of where we're at, so we are currently in AMP7, so we're in the middle of this slide at the moment. So that's the 5-year sort of 5-year period that we're in at the moment. They're called AMPs. Asset management periods, and certainly from a flood risk perspective and a working in partnership perspective, certainly from AMP6 and even back in AMP5, we were kind of really leading the way in terms of how we work together with others to manage flood risk. So, and we've kind of extended that and built on that going forward into AMP6, and we now. So some of you will be familiar with the partnership funding approach that we do. So Matt manages this for me. So we will contribute towards schemes, flood risk management schemes, where there's a kind of broader benefit. So if Matt and his team are developing a scheme, and we'll come on, I'll mention it in a minute, but take Long Bennington, for example. If there's benefits to us there as well, then we will look and see if there's a way that we can contribute towards that scheme. So during AMP7, we have really built on that, and our plans for AMP8 is to really extend that even further. So this kind of partnership approach to flood risk will clearly remain as we go towards AMP8. But now we want to start thinking about, well, what can we do around kind of managing storm overflows? What can we do about other challenges that we've got? How can we work together to manage that? So, so I mentioned Long Bennington. So Long Bennington is a really great example of our approach to that kind of co-funding approach, so that we can support. I think it's about £250,000 that we've put into the pot for Long Bennington to support the work that's doing there, because there are benefits to us of that work, and the direct benefits here. Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's keeping that by managing the surface water better in Long Bennington, which reduces flood risks to the community there, equally stops that surface water finding its way into our foul sewer system. That then stops that foul sewer system overloading. That means there's less pumping involved. That means there's less issues downstream at the works, and it potentially means, I don't know off the top of my head whether there are any, but it potentially means there's less storm overflows in Long Bennington as well. So, and this is what I was saying earlier when I was talking about taking a much more kind of place-based approach. In the past, we could have just said, oh, it's a flood scheme, and we've only got £100,000 worth of benefit there now. But because we now look at the Six Capitals approach when we value the work that we do, and we now look at a much bigger kind of place-based approach, looking at all the different issues within that kind of catchment, that sewage catchment, then there's opportunities for us to contribute more money towards that work. So, and Long Bennington is quite a big example, but there's other examples more, that we're looking to do, particularly working with Lincolnshire Highways. We've done some work recently in Lincoln, and there's work we're doing, which I'll touch on in a minute, that we want to do going forward as well. So there's some really great examples of kind of partnership working across Lincolnshire, and we just want to extend that and expand on that as much as we can. So, so I said I'd just touch on this quickly. So in terms of the kind of future of what we're doing, so you may or may not have heard that we set up what's called Get River Positive alongside Severn Trent about 18 months ago, maybe a couple of years ago now. And this is our commitment to make improvements to particularly rivers across the region. So, and you can see our commitments there on the right-hand side. But principally, this is about, with a big focus around storm overflows. So what can we do to work together with others to reduce the impact that storm overflows are having on the environment, and how can we reduce the number of storm overflows that are happening in the first place? So, and that all forms part of the work that we're doing around our WINEP, so the Water Industry Natural Environment Programme. So, so we are currently in this current 5-year investment programme. We're already investing £800 million, so almost £1 billion in the environment already in this period. And you can see in the middle blue box there, the kind of big focus around storm spills. So there's a lot of money being put forward already in this AMP to reduce spills. So whether that's new storm tanks at our works, so that's new tanks at the works that will take the excess flow from the works so that we're not kind of spilling from the works. It might be increasing capacity at those works so that we're reducing spills as well. Or it might be doing things like our kind of retrofit suds work that we're looking at to reduce the amount of surface water that's finding its way into the foul or combined sewer system in the first place. So we're already doing lots of that, but the plan going forward in the future is significantly more, as you would imagine, given particularly the interest from yourselves and interest from communities, particularly around storm overflows. So I must say though, before I go forward, we cannot talk about storm overflows without talking about flooding, because they are two sides of the same coin. And I think I mentioned this last time I was here. So the reason storm overflows were built in the past, and it's not what we do anymore. Any new systems, you don't build new storm overflows. But the reason they were built in the past was to stop people from flooding. So if we just closed all our storm overflows here, overnight, we'd be having many more conversations, particularly in this committee, about the number of people that are flooding. So yes, we don't want storm overflows, and yes, we are working, as hard as we can, and there will be a huge amount of investment going forward in the future to reduce the amount of storm overflows that we have. But we need to be realistic here that they have a role to play, which is to stop people's homes from flooding. And we know on this committee the impact that has for people. So we will do everything that we can to reduce the amount of spills that we have, but we just need to remember that they are there for a reason, and they have a historic purpose, and we will do everything that we can to change that as we go forward. But I think it's just worth reminding ourselves of why they are there. So. So in terms of the other things that we're looking to do as we go forward, so I think I showed this slide last time, but the kind of left-hand sort of line of bullet points there are just a selection of areas where we're really interested in working from particularly a storm overflow perspective, because we know there are issues there in terms of kind of high spills from storm overflows. And on the right-hand side, those are the areas where we're interested in looking at kind of flood risk opportunities to work together. And you'll see already there's some overlaps in some of those locations. So already we can think, well, look, what can we do to align some of that work, and what can we do to sort of work together with others to do that. So, and Matt reminded me earlier just to touch on two particular things that are particularly interested at the moment. So 2 SUDS trials that we've got planned. So one in Lincoln and one in South Kelsey, where we're working really closely with your highways team to understand the opportunities to kind of retrofit those SUDS into those locations. And the reason for that really is because, particularly where we've got combined systems, a big proportion of the flow that we get into the combined system comes from the highway. So what can we do to slow the flow or remove that flow of water finding its way from the highway that finds its way into our sewer network? So, and that might be having a flood risk impact or a storm overflow impact downstream. That doesn't necessarily matter at the moment. It's about what can we do to get these installed, and then what can we learn from that as we've installed that? What can we learn from working really closely with highways, particularly with that kind of future in mind of working together more closely going forward? So. And here I've just got a few examples of the sort of things that we're talking about, and particularly Councillor Baxter, I don't know why this slide, there we go, picking up your point about SUDS can be bad and poorly designed, and I couldn't agree with you more. It's really, really frustrating when you see poor designs, and especially when you see the thing on paper and then what you see on the ground is something completely different. It's particularly frustrating. So, but these are all, vast majority of these pictures, I think all but one of these pictures are in the UK. These are all, these are all retrofit schemes. It's not on new build sites. These are all retrofit schemes where things have been implemented to slow the flow of stormwater finding its way into the pipe network. So, and these are sorts of things that we can absolutely deliver across Lincolnshire, and we are delivering elsewhere as well, and will make a big impact. And they're not a silver bullet. They're not going to be, the kind of, this is going to solve all our problems. Of course it isn't, but they will make a huge difference. The more that we can slow the flow of water at source, so higher up in the catchment, rather than building big tanks at the bottom of the catchment to catch this water, then it will have a much greater impact. So, and then just really want to finish just quickly on kind of managing our network, so particularly for new members here, just touching on our so Matt and my kind of operational colleagues. This is just a still from one of our recent adverts. These guys, they work 24/7 to keep our network running. So they are out there in the rain and so forth, in the middle of the night, keep doing stuff to kind of keep the system working. So, and these are numbers from Lincolnshire. So we have about 10,000 jobs raised across Lincolnshire every year, of which 8,000 of those are blockages. So the vast, and it should be said here, so the vast majority, and it normally runs between, and the numbers here line up quite nicely, but anywhere between 80 and 90% of flooding incidents that we have, internal flooding incidents that we have every single year, are due to blockages. So anything that you can do, here's my challenge to all the committee members here and elected members, anything you can do to engage with your communities about what are the right things and what are the wrong things to be putting down the toilet and down the drain can make a big impact. So, huge number of blockages there that are cleared across Lincolnshire. So, and there was I can't remember who asked it earlier, but around kind of maintenance of networks. So we have a planned proactive maintenance kind of regime where we will go out, where we know we have hot spots, where we know we have regular blockage points, where we know we might get silt in the system, and we will go out and maintain those areas. So, and again, if there are any locations that committee members are aware of that you think we need to be aware of, that we're not on top of, just get in touch and we can look and see if that's an area that could be added to future maintenance regimes. So, and as it says there, you know, we will prioritise those areas that we know repeat regularly, because we know those are the ones that are clearly going to come back and could cause a flooding or a pollution going forward in the future. And one piece of really positive news, so Matt and I have been trying for a long time to get our operational colleagues more engaged kind of on the ground with yourselves locally, particularly with highways teams and particularly with kind of elected members. And we've had a change of leadership at the top of our water recycling kind of networks team recently, and they are really committed to kind of getting out there and working really closely with yourselves and with our partners, to much more so. So in the past, kind of Matt and I have been a bit of a conduit for that sort of stuff, and now they want to be really kind of front and centre of all the work that we do, which is really, really positive. So, you know, we're still here. Matt and I will still be here to support, and whoever kind of replaces me going forward. But yeah, you know, hopefully you'll see far more of our kind of operational colleagues going forward as well. So, and this is just a few examples of stuff. I think I showed this last time, but you know, the work that they do and the stuff they find. So, and I particularly relevant the two pictures kind of on the right hand side. I think that was in Skegness, I seem to recall from last time, and you know, you can see there's been a blockage there in the system, and the picture at the bottom is what that looks like after it's been dealt with. So, you know, when we find these things, we will put them right, and I think one of the challenges back to the kind of, I suppose, the criticism around SUDs that are out there is that one of the great thing about kind of SUDs is they keep water on the surface and they keep the issues on the surface. So when something goes wrong, you can see very, very quickly that there is a problem. Clearly, if you get a collapse or a blockage in a pipe like that, you don't know something's happened until you have a pollution or a flooding incident. So saying that, what we are doing at the moment, you will have seen the challenges we set ourselves for PR24. One of them was around innovation. And one of the things that we are doing now is trying to use data and monitoring far more than we've ever done in the past. So we're putting something like 30,000 new monitors in our sewer network. And what we can use, and it's way beyond my kind of knowledge of how these things work, but it uses things like artificial intelligence and uses the kind of flow data from all those sort of those data points from those sort of flow loggers. And soon it will be able to tell us if a blockage is even just forming. You'll start to see a drop off in the flow, and we can get out to it before it forms a fully blown blockage. So yes, we are using innovation and data to start doing this stuff. But obviously, if we can keep the water on the surface in the first place, well, then it makes it a lot easier for us and everyone else to see what's going on. So, and I don't know why this slide's in here, but it was just a final quick kind of link up of just showing the kind of how we need to work really, really closely with your highways team. So generally speaking, we have the responsibility for the sewer pipe down the middle of the road, and then generally highways will have the responsibility for the gully and the pipe that goes to the gully. So, and often, you know, you can get blockages in all of those parts of systems, and actually going forward, and we're doing this in other areas as well, that you know, if we find a problem that's not on our system, we might just clear it, or we'll kind of flag it with our colleagues in highways and so forth, and that working relationship is becoming far, far closer than it has done in the past. So hopefully you'll see our guys out and about, you'll see these differences as we move forward, but I'll leave it there, and obviously very, very happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Just to say that if you are, as I understand, moving to pastures new, my congratulations, and I hope that same with colleagues in respect of your new role. I'm sure if your remit includes the new reservoir, then we will see you at this committee still for quite some years to come. I've got a number of speakers, so Councillor Baxter and then Councillor Taylor, please.
Thank you for your report, and thank you for all the times you've been to Face for Music at this committee on behalf of a company that is suffering reputational issues, I would say. On Friday, we discussed in this chamber what we as a council might do about sewage discharge. As you know, it's a national issue. As you know, your company was fined £2.65 million earlier this year for discharges of sewage in Essex. I wondered if you know how much sewage has been discharged into Lincolnshire rivers. I appreciate all the slides and so on. It would be, if you want us to read slides, it would be useful to circulate them beforehand or put them in a font which is legible, because I could read barely any of what you put on the screen. Nice pictures though, always nice to have nice pictures. So the main question is about sewage, but also I wonder if you had any updates on what we were talking about earlier this year. I think it was last year, Anglian Water were described, I think by Martin as the main culprit in terms of unnecessary road closures, allegedly closing a road for a week in order to change 1 metre. Is that situation now fixed? Do you think that our highways guys would say this is no longer a problem with Anglian Water? So yes, sewage and highways. Thank you.
Just very quickly to pick up Councillor Baxter, I wouldn't want this committee to tread on the toes of Councillor Brooks and the Highways Scrutiny Committee, which I know are very well cited on that particular issue, and I'm sure will be again. Just very quickly, Councillor Brooks.
Yeah, just to come in, just for information, Councillor Baxter, Anglian Water have been to the Highways and Transport Scrutiny Committee. They have an action plan in place to reduce the numbers of those incidents, and they're coming back to the Highways and Transport Scrutiny Committee in December with a progress report on how they're going with that action plan and how hopefully the incidents which have been happening have reduced significantly. So that's where we are with it. But they have also signed up to a charter with the council as to how they're going to deal with these things. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Jonathan.
Yeah, good. I'm really pleased to hear that, because that was a direct action from the last time we were here. So, and I did pass that on to colleagues. So that's really good news that we're picking that up. So, and I hope that we see an improvement on that. So I'm sure we will. So, yeah. In terms of sewage discharges, so I think we'll pick up on this in more detail on the 20th, and whether it's myself or a colleague that comes. So. So just two things on that. So we do have a website where you can see where we publish all our data around sewage discharges. So I'll share that with the committee after this, and you can look in your own local area and look. You can see exactly where the discharges are, and you can see how much they spilt. So that is a look back. So that will look back to last year. That's the kind of historical data. So you can see what we did last year and compare that to the year before and so forth. So the other thing we're working on, and it will be live from December this year, is live mapping of our storm overflows. So from I don't know when in December, but at some point in December this year, you will be able to. There will be a map on our website which will show you when our storm overflows have been activated and when the activation started and when it stopped. So you'll be able to see live, and that will be. I think we're looking to be updated every 10 minutes. So it's basically near real-time reporting on our storm overflows going forward. So that as from December, that will be ready to go, and I'm sure we can cover that in more detail in November, when we'll have a bit more detail of what that's going to look like and how you'll be able to use it. So obviously that data is based on our monitors that are installed at our storm overflows. So what the map will do is will tell you, where the storm overflows are, whether it's active or not, or whether there's a problem with the monitor, because obviously we do occasionally have problems with these monitors, and often they're in very remote locations. So trying to get them running as they should do all the time is definitely a challenge, and it's a challenge that all of the industry are having at the moment. So you'll be able to see whether it's live or not, and actually whether the monitor's working. So we're also looking to do some additional work. So once the map is published in December, that'll be the kind of, is a storm overflow spilling or not? One of the things that we're particularly conscious of is particularly at the coast. So where users will be using beaches and want to know whether there's a spill or not happening, as and when they're at the beach or about to go to the beach or whatever. So We need to find a way to incorporate that with what's called our Beach Aware system, which is an alert system that tells particularly district councils when there might be water quality impacts from our storm overflows. So that's not particularly easy to do at the moment because that alert system doesn't work on a 10-minute cycle. It takes a bit longer than that because there's coastal modelling that needs to be done as part of that process of generating that alert. So at the moment we're trying to find a way to do that, but you'll see that as coming as the map, as that map gets updated in due course.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor, sorry, first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Jonathan, for this update. Certainly some detailed information there to absorb, and some of my points have been covered. I'll try to keep them brief. It's encouraging here regarding the increased investment. It's particularly encouraging. And also you referred a few times, Jonathan, there to the increased partnership working between colleagues. And also during your presentation, you mentioned engagement with elected members. That's also encouraging and much appreciated. You've just covered some of the points there regarding the live website, and Councillor Bax referred to the issue regarding road closures, and I've just heard from colleagues regarding the action plan for highways, so that's encouraging news. But moving on from that, can I just ask or discuss a communication strategy? Because often we do hear when there's bad news and Anglian Water are criticised, and you take the hit when there's bad news. Often there's a need to defend yourself when attacked, and well, even if it's traditional ways through local newspapers, the attack takes place, arguments out there, but not a defence by Anglian Water regarding the reality or an update or some information. And again regarding the road closures, an example where it went particularly well, I know it was a fight against time, was a few days before the Spalding Flower Parade returned this year. A major road into Spalding was closed, emergency situation that was, and you've just shown the photographs there of staff there working throughout the day and night. That was an example where a race against time, it was successful, it was opened just on time for that to happen. I know there was lots of media on that one that did happen, so that was encouraging. But regarding that, is there a policy to communicate those issues, such as, is it the local media, is it local businesses? Because we know it's so frustrating for a business when a road is closed and congestion is created and diversions. It's frustrating, it costs them money, it's damaging the economy, it can add to pollution on the roads. So so a few questions there on that immediate, up-to-date communication regarding those emergency issues. Also that issue I mentioned earlier regarding also when you spoke there about blockages, and also all having a role to play. I'm happy to help support that and put out the message there. So they are the general comments there regarding your communication strategy and the issue regarding road closures. But it's encouraging to hear there is that action plan in place regarding that frustration of the road closures, particularly the sign saying road closure and diversion when that road's actually been reopened. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you. So a com strategy is, you're absolutely right, it's really important. It's a delicate and tricky subject, as you can imagine at the moment, though. So, and interestingly, speaking to our colleagues in our kind of press team and so forth, is that the steer that we have at the moment is to generally steer away from any positive press. And I know that might sound crazy, but the reason for that is as soon as we put anything out there at the moment, it gets spun into something negative. So even when you're pushing out a positive story, so say we're working in Long Bennington, for example, and supporting that work, we wouldn't put anything out by ourselves from that at the moment at all. So we would look to maybe support LCC in terms of their press release and might have a quote in there. That's all we would do. We wouldn't go for anything kind of proactive around that. Because as soon as you put anything out there, it'll go, that's a lovely story, but you're still spilling from that storm overflow or whatever it might be. So, and it just generates more negative press in a way. So, and it's really frustrating. I know my colleagues, particularly in our kind of comms and press teams, find it hugely frustrating because we do a huge amount of really positive work and it just doesn't cut through at the moment, unfortunately. So, and I don't know at what point it will cut through again, because we used to do these stories quite a lot. So, I think we need to get to a point where we've won back the trust of communities, and and that might take a long time. So yes, it is a challenge for sure. I think picking up on your point around just more general kind of specific comms, whenever we've got particularly planned work, we would always go out to kind of business owners and the community and tell them that we will be closing this road or that road. So, and what a diversion might look like and so forth. So that's absolutely part of our comms strategy whenever we have work planned. Obviously, if it's an emergency closure, it's a bit harder to do that because obviously time is of the essence. But again, we will do our best to make people aware of any closures wherever we can. So, yeah, please do, Matt. Yeah.
So we've got a live dashboard called In Your Area. If people search In Your Area on Google, Anglian Water, they'll find it. And that lists in very near real time the live instance we've got going on, the latest update, that if they rang up the call centre, that's the same update they'd get from them, because that's all they're looking at essentially is the latest update from site. So I'll be advised to all the elected members, if anyone wants to know when a road's going to be reopened, or when their water might come back on, or when, just always look at In Your Area, because that is the absolute latest update they're going to find.
We'll send a link to that as well after. So I'll do the link for the storm overflow, the existing storm overflow webpage, and we'll do a link to In Your Area, so everyone's got that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jonathan. It feels a bit like shooting the messenger here. I agree word for word what Councillor Baxter said. Can you send those slides to us? The other one is, I'm always amazed at the actual vastness of the area. You know, when you actually say it like you did, you realise how large it is. 4,000 pumping stations. Like Councillor Baxter said, you have been charged with illegal discharges, but why was those discharges made? The other one is the border investors, and there's a big play about our purpose. What proportion of profit went into the purpose, and what proportion went into the shareholders' profit? And lastly, where in Lincoln is the subs? There's a picture, and I think it said uphill, but I wasn't so sure. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of the investment, I need to take that away. I've no idea off the top of my head what proportion of investment goes from investors, but we can come back. We can come back on that. Of course, we can. So. In terms of the discharge in Essex that Councillor Baxter mentioned, that's a very specific case in Jaywick on the Essex coast, where an operation issue meant that we were spilling. So it was part of the final effluent discharge, and there was a spill. So without getting into too much detail, and I don't know the full details myself, but I think we were basically spilling for about 30 seconds every day for a long time, for 18 months or something, before it was picked up. And because it was such a short time, it wasn't picked up on the monitoring, and that's why it wasn't registered. So this was a discharge via a long sea outfall to the North Sea, and even during the court case, it was agreed that there was no environmental impact, but there was still a £2-something million fine for that. So it's something that, obviously, as soon as we found it, we rectified that problem. So, and this is one of the challenges, as I was talking about. It's a large network, of which all of it is most of it is generally underground. So, when you do have a problem, it is a challenge to find it, which is why it's so important that we try and find those innovative ways to pick up on these issues before they happen, so that we know these things are happening. So, and then obviously, yes, Lincoln, you asked about uphill. So, Matt, do you know where that is exactly?
Yeah, so it's on the verges of Netlham Road, because we've got a lot of issues on the streets that kind of flow off Netlham Road in terms of flood risk. So trying to better deal with surface water actually on Netlham Road and on the verges of Netlham Road, rather than using the side streets essentially as ways of draining the highway. But to note, that is a trial, and the reason it's a trial is because generally highways teams across our region haven't yet risen to the idea of adopting SUDs en masse in the highway, and there's a lot of evidence that needs to be gathered to prove that they're effective and they don't add substantially to maintenance costs and things like that. So we're doing a number of trials in Lincolnshire, we're doing some trials in Essex, we're doing some trials in Norfolk. You know, so hopefully with all those trials we can bring the joint learning to prove that SUDs in the highway are a very effective way of draining it more sustainably.
Thank you very much. Councillor Haigh, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I think everybody agrees that sewer overflows are not a good thing to have. And thank you for arranging for the information to come to us, Jonathan. But without rainfall data, we don't know. That still doesn't answer the full picture, because sewer overflows are allowed to overflow in exceptional rainfall. It's the ones where there's no rainfall or slight rainfall are the problem ones that want looking at first. Thank you.
Just to say, completely agree. Yeah, and that's so our investment going forward, particularly in AMP8, and I should have said, so our whole WINET programme in this current AMP was 811 million, I think it said on the slide. In next AMP, bear in mind this hasn't been approved by our regulator yet, but we're looking at over £1 billion just on storm overflows. So the investment there is significant. Now, that investment, we will absolutely be looking at those that spill the most, those that have the biggest environmental kind of consequences when they do spill, and those, as you say, that might be spilling when we have low volumes of rainfall. So.
I'm likely to disagree about your £1 billion, so
well, we'll see what happens. And to be fair, ours is not as much as some other companies as well. If you go to, I think it's somewhere, you know, in the northwest, they're looking at probably 10 billion. So, yeah, but they have far more combined systems than we do. So.
Thank you. Councillor Bonney.
Thank you very much. Just very quick one on communications. I appreciate putting out press releases can be difficult. Sometimes answering emails to particular individuals can be difficult as well because they misinterpret it. But I find with highways, my regular meetings with the 2 highways officers who are responsible in the ward or the division that I represent, very useful. We can pick up information and pass them back. I'm just wondering whether that is something that perhaps Anglican Water could do in making that clear. At the moment, it seems to be a responsive conversation rather than a regular conversation to keep proactive work flowing.
So yeah, we have a really quite a large public affairs team, and their job is to interact with elected members on a daily basis. We'll send them the email address to reach those directly. If there's an issue that you feel isn't getting addressed or isn't being listened to, you know, our public affairs team will always ensure a timely response to those even difficult questions. And if there's an ongoing issue that you do want a sort of engagement plan set up, we can absolutely do that as well. So we'll send the email address.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. I actually have a regular meeting with highways booked in every 6 weeks. They can bring up points with me that they would like us to deal with so the other way. So in a sense, it's a bit more than just that responsive picking up a phone or email to find some information out.
Yeah. So we do have attendance at all the local drainage groups across Lincolnshire. As you can imagine, the amount of engagement that we have to do, and you know the size of our teams, we have to prioritise resourcing our frontline staffing levels. You know, our way of engaging with kind of local authorities, IDBs, Environment Agency, and councils is absolutely through those local drainage groups. So I would say that you know, if you know, I appreciate you guys are pressed for time as well, but you know, we do update highways managers and highway officers through those regular drainage groups, what's going on, and we share common issues and talk about common solutions. So highways should have a good idea about what's going on with Anglian Water, and actually I meet with Nathan Whitfield on a very regular basis, who's kind of head of the strategic investment, looking at the long-term investment on highways and in terms of capital schemes. So we do have a very joined up approach. but it's just about me prioritising where we kind of resource those, that kind of engagement. But as I said, if there's a specific issue, I appreciate market raising has been a long-standing issue in terms of drainage, and if you want a regular catch with me, see how that goes for the coming months, we can do that. It's fine.
Thank you. I don't see anyone else indicating to speak, so genuinely thank you for your update and contributions and taking the time to answer the question that members have posed. Obviously, we are going to pick up on a significant chunk around these issues at our next meeting, as we've already advertised. So I think if we're all content to note the Anglian Water presentation and that we will pick up on any comments that members have asked for feedback on, and if we're able to share that presentation for members to read at their leisure, I think that will be helpful. Moving on to item 9 is the Flood and Water Management Scrutiny Committee work programme, which is 43 to 45 of our agenda, and I will let Simon take us through that, please.
Good morning, Chairman. Thank you. If I could ask members of the committee just to refer to page 44 of the agenda pack, which lists out the items for subsequent meetings. As already stated during the course of this morning, there will be consideration of sewage discharge following the motion and this morning's discussion added to the 20th of November meeting. Warren Peppard also mentioned that there is likely to be a need for a SUDS update at the November meeting, and we're also looking for an update on Project Groundwater, which was last reported to the committee in May, but there have been developments within that project. There are items on page 45 which are to be programmed, and I will be discussing with colleagues perhaps if those items could be listed from the February meeting onward, because having added those 3, that makes 6 items for the November meeting. So I don't know whether that is sufficient, Chairman, for the business in November, given that one of those may be quite significant. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think there's any doubt that November will be quite a weighty meeting, but I'm sure we'll give all of those issues our thorough consideration. Does anyone have any any items that they would like us to consider for the future? Councillor Clark.
On the November meeting, can we have a report about pollution in the rivers?
I think we will. When you say pollution, what pollution precisely?
Pollution from sewers and things.
Yes. So that's what we've just discussed.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is we need it separate, don't we? From we don't want the water board telling us what pollution there is. We need it from the Environment Agency.
I think all partners that usually come to these meetings will be present, and I don't imagine that members will have any fear or favour over the debate that they carry on, and I'm quite content that we have a full and frank discussion. The focus, of course, being, picking up on the request from Council on Friday, being what actions this Council can undertake, and not wishing to preempt the outcome of any discussions that we might have. That may well be along the lines of what we can ask our executive members to undertake to write on our behalf, that sort of thing. So I'm sure we'll get there, and certainly for my mind, this isn't just a water company thing. As we have discussed in this committee on numerous occasions, there are challenges with what, for example, the Environment Agency can enforce, what the categories of seriousness of pollution which they are able to take. So I'm pretty sure all of these points we will pick up thoroughly in November. Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chairman. Is it possible to put on the medium-term plan some update regarding internal drainage boards? There's 2 sides to that. There's the kind of interaction of the drainage boards with the Environment Agency and ourselves. and secondly, the ongoing finance of them. Thank you.
I'm happy to include a brief update on, I'm happy if members would prefer us to keep a watching brief on that, and I know that there are lobbying efforts ongoing. I know that there are meetings due to be held over this next meeting period, which there may well be something that's worthwhile bringing back. So very happy to make sure that that happens. Seeing nobody else, thank you very much for that. Thank you for your contributions this morning. I will declare the meeting closed and wish you all a safe journey home and enjoy the rest of your day.